So imagine you're so good at what you do that you completely change the game. But there's a catch. You're always the new kid, always the outsider. That right there is the story of Igor Stravinsky, and we're going to get into how his life as an exile created a sound that literally shook the world. Okay, think about this for a second. Have you ever had to move to a new town, or maybe just switch to a new school? Remember that feeling? You're the new person, you don't know anyone, you have to figure everything out from scratch. It's kind of tough, right? Well, now imagine doing that not just once, but over and over again, for your entire life. That was the deal for the composer Igor Stravinsky. But here's the crazy part. That constant feeling of being the new kid, it's exactly what turned him into a legend. Which brings up a huge question, How do you figure out who you are and find your own unique voice when you've literally lost your home? Stravinsky's life is basically the roadmap for that. You can almost think of his life like a video game. He started at his home base in Russia. Then he had to complete an escape level to Switzerland because of a war. After that, he leveled up in France, which was like this massive creative hub. And then he unlocked the final chapter in the USA. Every new place was a new level with new rules. So let's pull up the stat screen for a second. Igor Stravinsky, born in Russia way back in 1882. Music was totally in his DNA. But then huge events like World War I and the Russian Revolution forced him out of his home country. He basically spent the rest of his life as a creative wanderer. But before all that, he had this one moment that made him an international superstar. Seriously, think of a video going so viral that it literally breaks the internet. That's pretty much what Stravinsky did to the music world. Except he did it in 1913. The year is 1913. We're in Paris, France. Stravinsky is this up-and-coming composer, and he's working with this legendary dance company, the Ballet Russe. And tonight is the big night. It's the premiere of his brand new, super experimental ballet. It's called The Rite of Spring. Nobody, and I mean nobody, in that audience knew what they were in for. The music was just so different, so intense. The rhythms were wild and unpredictable, the sounds were harsh, and the audience totally lost their minds. People started shouting, fighting, throwing stuff. A full-on riot broke out inside this fancy theater. It was a massive scandal, and it made Stravinsky famous overnight. So right after becoming this rock star composer, Stravinsky has to leave Russia. And as he moves around, from Switzerland to France to the US, his music starts to change too. He was kind of like a musical chameleon, soaking up the atmosphere of each new place and letting it totally transform his style. And you can really hear the difference. His early stuff from his Russian period, it was huge, epic, based on old Russian folk tales, and used these giant orchestras. But later, his style got a new name, neoclassical. It was much tighter, more focused, and he started using smaller bands. So what even is neoclassicism? Well, the best way to think about it is like a remix. Stravinsky would take these old-school classical tracks from composers like Bach or Mozart, and then he'd drop his own wild, modern, spiky beat right over them. It was old meets new, and it sounded awesome. But here's the thing, and this is the real twist in the story. Even though his address kept changing and his style kept evolving, you can take the composer out of Russia, but you can't take the Russia out of the composer. This leads to a really interesting question, doesn't it? With all this change, did he just leave his Russian identity behind? Did his music start to sound, I don't know, like everything else? No way, not at all. He always carried what you could call his Russian toolkit with him. No matter where he lived, he was always pulling from the sounds of Russian folk songs, ancient church chants, and these really powerful driving Russian rhythms. And that toolkit, that was his secret weapon. It's what made his modern remixes sound so unique. This mix of his deep Russian roots and his new global experiences created a sound that no one else could even get close to. So, why are we still talking about this guy? He's been gone for over 50 years. Why is he still such a big deal? Well, it really comes down to three things. 1, he didn't just bend the rules of music, he completely shattered them. 2, he ended up teaching and inspiring a whole new generation of musicians. And 3, he became this global icon, whose music is still played all over the world. Yeah, his influence wasn't just some small thing. It was like a tidal wave that changed the course of music forever. Basically, any composer who came after him had to deal with the world that Stravinsky had created. So, if there's one thing to remember from all this, it's this. Stravinsky's story shows us that being an outsider being forced out of your comfort zone can feel like a huge challenge, but it can also become your greatest superpower.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, right? Stravinsky's journey makes you wonder, maybe leaving home, maybe being forced to find your own way, is actually what helps you find your strongest, most unique voice.